Our guest on today's episode is in the middle of it, whether it's fundraising or the college football playoff or the Heisman Trophy Palooza that went on this last week. Jeramiah Dickey is the athletic director at Boise State. He's going to join us on today's episode. I'm John Canzano. You can read me at johncanzano.com. He's Jon Wilner. You can find him at wilnerhotline.com. If you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit the subscribe button. Make a commitment to us right now. We'll show up in your feed. Share this podcast with others. That's how it works. Don't be stingy. Don't keep it to yourself. Wilner, how are you, man? We got Jeramiah Dickey today.
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this. We could probably talk to him for 3 hours, given everything going on with Boise and college football, college athletics, right? I mean, I saw him last week in Las Vegas at a forum, Sports Business Journal forum on intercollegiate athletics. And, he was on a panel talking about, what all the issues that are going on. And it's one thing after another. And I feel like he's got a great sense for both sides of it because he was working at TCU for many years. So he's been at the power conference level and now he's running a group of 5 shop. And his team is one of the biggest stories of the season. So he's going to cover a ton of ground for us, hopefully.
Yeah, I want to ask him how they kept Ashton Genty. I mean, it's a question. And of course, after Dickey does his interview, you and I will kick around a variety of subjects ranging from Nick Rolovich's return to the Pac-12's timeline on media rights and expansion to the Big Ten bellyaching about the schedule and why our Heisman ballots didn't.
That's right. We disagreed on the high. Yeah, that'll be good. But yeah, he's in it. Like you said, he is in the midst of it. So this will be fascinating. Yeah. So we'd love to welcome in Jeramiah Dickey right now, athletic director at Boise State. Jeramiah, thank you so much for joining us. We know how busy it is these days up there getting ready for the playoff. But I'd love to know what New York was like for you and Spencer and Ashton, a little behind the scenes flavor for us from the Heisman.
Yeah. What an experience, as an athletic director, you God willing have more than one opportunity, but it was not an opportunity we took for granted, just to be there in that room and especially as a group of 5 institution and having a guy like Ashton who is very deserving of the opportunity. It's difficult to put into words. It was a priceless experience. And one, I God willing, we get back to it at some point. We've had some phenomenal student athletes come through these walls in the past, but it's the who's who of our industry. And as a fan to be in the same room with a lot of those past Heisman winners,
yep.
Guys I grew up watching and getting to meet some of them, it was just really cool, man. It's hard to put words to it.
I was thinking about Ashton's story, as the ceremony was going on and what, the evidence that he provides that, loyalty to your school and retention of an athlete is possible in a world where everybody else seems to be getting in the portal. And you even went through a coaching change amid that, and he stays at Boise State. What do you think the glue was for him?
Culture is king. And I think that relationship he has with not only Spencer, but that staff and maybe Coach Cutter, I think it matters. We were consistent with Ashton through his recruitment and just the person he is. I think his mom and dad spoke to it, at the ceremony of, being in a military family and that your word means something and his overall commitment, to being a Bronco and I think it goes without saying. And obviously you've seen the responses from Bronco Nation and the love and appreciation they have for Ashton. But his legacy was important. And, this community really embraced him and he embraced this community, what he was doing off the field of play, even before he was on maybe your radar, the national media's radar. It just shows you what type of person he is. And I'm really grateful because, as we are experiencing right now with the portal, he could have very easily have left and for a lot more money. And he chose his legacy. He chose being a Bronco. And I think many of us have those decisions and, you got to really want to be a Bronco. And he did.
Do you think that I'm kind of curious about the dynamic you have with Spencer and Dirk Cutter, right? You've got young head coach, and here's Dirk, tons of experience. And how that works with, current players that are 20 something years old and 19, 20 years old. You got the portal, you got NIL, and you have gone with a younger coach. You think that is maybe the way of the future right now, given the economics?
I wouldn't necessarily put it just on the economics. I think it is. I mean, you look at the CFP and you look at Oregon and Arizona State, and you have some really young coaches. And I use myself as an example. As a young athletic director who had never been in the chair before. What we're navigating as an industry is really challenging and extremely uncomfortable many days. And, but when you don't necessarily have that foundation of having done it before, it's a little bit easier to take the hand you're dealt and play it to the best of your ability. And I think these younger coaches are realizing that. They understand the social media world. They understand the actual value of name, image, and likeness. And they're also not in a control position anymore, like maybe coaches have been in the past. Yeah. And I think that they're more adept at managing that and navigating it with this younger generation that's coming in that in many cases they've been monetizing their name, image, and likeness since they were, juniors and seniors in high school. And so I think there's something there. I don't believe we're an outlier at the schools I mentioned. Yep. I think the industry is getting younger, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for people like Spencer and myself.
Except in Chapel Hill.
Except in Chapel. Yeah. But I also think that shows you that's a good example. I mean, everyone's throwing everything they possibly can at the challenges that we have. And without a lot of solutions and really no set template on how to find success, I think people are willing to take more chances. And I'm not saying that's taking a chance there. Obviously, he's an amazing coach, Hall of Fame coach, and has done just unbelievable things over the course of his career. We are professionalizing, and so I think you could see more of those coaches maybe come down to our level as we continue to adapt and probably build out a system that maybe isn't going to be the same, but at least similar to what the NFL is.
Before coming in for this interview, you were meeting with potential donors or meeting with your donors, and you're having a lot of those conversations. People are excited about the product. They're excited about Ashton being in New York. They're excited about the transition to the Pac-12 and the playoff. Yeah. How have the conversations with fundraising changed, and where are you with I know that there were some schools initially that were a little reluctant to have the donors go all in on NIL and maybe cannibalize some of the gift giving on campus. How does that math work in your world?
Yeah, at this point, every dollar counts, and whether I'm spending it on our coaches, our staff, on our infrastructure, or on our student athletes, it all matters, and so that's really simplified it for us and my team. It's part of our story, and this is the hand we've been dealt, as I said earlier, and we're going to play it to the best of our ability, and I think donors have really embraced that. We've been very clear. This isn't something that just happened, right? I've been here coming up on 4 years, and from the day I got here, this has been part of the story. This is what's coming. Well, now it's here, and I think our donors appreciate the level of transparency that I operate in. This is what we need to do, and it's made it easier, obviously, with the success we've had. Proof is in the pudding, and we have a little more street cred right now. And I told them 4 years ago, this is what's going to happen. And we're going to plan the work the plan. And now we're at a place that plan came to fruition, and they've seen the fruits of our labor and their support and how impactful that's been. And that makes it that much easier to get back in front of them and say, you helped us get to this point. How do we do it again and again and again? Because consistency is key. And we have to keep moving. We've never had what everyone else has, and our donors know that. And in many ways, it's a point of pride. But we have to continue to fundraise and monetize our operations maybe differently than others, because we know what we're competing with. When you look at our budget compared to the CFP 12 overall, us being one of the 12, we are an outlier. We are the lowest on that list, and by a lot. And I don't necessarily, my message to our fan base is not to get to where a Notre Dame is, or a Texas, or Georgia, but we need more than what we got. And my job is to go out and find it. And that's what we're continuing to do.
What did you see from the CFP process that you think may need to change? Was there anything? It was very controversial for some conferences and some schools. It worked out great for Boise State, but it seems pretty clear that at least the Big Ten and the SEC, they have a different agenda. How do you see this thing unfolding?
Yeah, I don't think everything I've heard since we were chosen, it leads me to believe that they're going to go back to the drawing board and probably try to figure out another way of operating the CFP. But I think it worked well, and maybe I'm biased maybe because I paid attention more to this year because we've been in the conversation and we knew what our schedule was. But I felt like the fact that a group of 5 team had hope and had a path that it really ignited all the fan bases. And it wasn't just ours. It was Memphis at some point. It was Tulane. It was Army. It was Navy. There were a number of UNLV in our own conference. There were a number of teams and that made every game relevant. And it really drove that this new world of college athletics and social media and the storytelling. And so I don't think it's necessarily broken. Would I like to see more teams and more opportunities? Obviously the group of 5, we understand who we are and we're all fighting for that one seat. I think anytime you provide more opportunities, it's going to drive, the interest of the various alumni and fan bases and communities in general. I don't necessarily like that we only have one seat at that table and understanding you basically have to play perfect to even get another seat. But I do see this as at least a good starting point for what the future looks like. And I'm obviously bullish on what we represent. And, I know we still have a minimum a game left and we have work to do, but we've earned it. And whether it was us or someone else, I want us to continue to have those opportunities in the future because I think it matters.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are interested and probably rooting for you to advance and make some noise and demonstrate that, hey, this wasn't just a polite invitation to the tournament for the G5. Week 2, you lose that close game with Oregon. I think you and I talked that week. And did you leave that game thinking that mission accomplished that night, or how did you feel about that result? Because it got held up all year long as evidence that you do belong. Yeah,
quite honestly, I left that game, pissed off. We left an opportunity out there, and our team, and I'm not speaking out of turn. I think our coach had said that, and it really made me proud as the athletic director. Our team was upset. They worked hard for that opportunity and had a chance, many chances to put that game away. And that's not taking anything away from Oregon. Oregon obviously has been tremendous this year and is the number 1 team in the country. But that was such a pivotal moment for us. I think that's when, not just our fan base, but the nation realized, okay, Boise State has something. And this Ashton Jeanty kid is legit and this team can do something special. And, so is it, you never want to, we're in this business to win, we want to win. And, and I hate losing. I hate losing more than I like winning. But when you come out of a game like that and quite honestly, from a media standpoint, you thought maybe we did win. If you didn't, we wouldn't have watched the game. I think that really bode well for us and the attention that we got leading into the following weeks. And that's a testament to Spencer and this team. They went in there fully expecting to win. They came out of there upset that they didn't, but they didn't cry over spilled milk. It's what's next mentality. And that's what we operate under. And they went back to work and continued to have an amazing season.
If I could just pivot for a second, I'm curious because, anytime I talk to an athletic director about what is the job these days, right? It is just endless series of challenges, right? And challenges that are different than you had to deal with 3 or 4 years ago. What do you do to detox, to get away, to kind of get at a place of peace with yourself ever, especially during the football season? Do you ever get a minute away?
I don't. And, I'm not a finished product, guys. I'm still learning a lot. This job is very challenging, and as an athletic director, I always have to think about what's next, and for me, and it's probably personality driven. I'm never in a situation of peace, or, I'm always grinding and looking to see how I can better our situation and what the future holds. And my job as a leader of this department is to never settle and ultimately bring our team along in the process and for the ride. And so I don't necessarily detox, especially during the season. I will, I was just texting my wife. We plan on going to the coast at some point at the end of January, early February. That's usually probably the deadest time of the year for me, even though we have basketball going on and some other sport programs. But I do need probably a little bit of a break. I'm running on fumes. It's a long season, and the way that, it used to be seasonal. It's 24/7 now. We started this year, last year. I went from making a change on a coach to hiring the interim to already working on our marketing and how we were going to sell out 6 games, ultimately sold out 7 because of the Mountain West Championship. That is a year cycle. And so we're doing a lot of that now. You can't ever stop in this industry. As soon as you stop, you will get passed up, and good becomes good enough and it becomes bad pretty quickly. And we have to keep our foot on the gas. And that's my job as the leader. And so I'm okay. My wife reminds me, some days when I'm complaining or, I become an energy vampire for myself. She reminds me, no one's making me do this. You love this and man or mouse. And so I get that a lot at home.
There's a push in Congress to look into college athletics. And I think there's some concern about the Olympic sports, potential for football to split away. So might be some antitrust, discussions with committees. What do you think the future holds? How do you see college athletics 5 years, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of the things that maybe keep me up at night. Title IX is a concern. I don't think it's a matter of if it's an antitrust issue. I think there's some big issues that we're going to need help as an industry. We're not a united front. And so what I see happening and it's hard to look further than 5 years from now. But I think at the end of this decade, football will break away from the NCAA. And I'm not here to say, that's a good or bad thing, but, the way everything is setting up and what football is and the professionalization of our industry, I do see that happening. And a lot of that led to, our decisions around bettering our situation, because I want us to be included in that group. And whether that's a pipe dream or not, my job is to believe when others don't. And I believe we have the resources and the brand and the competitiveness to do something epic here. And we're going to continue to grind forward with the assumption that football is going to break away, and it is going to look very different than maybe it does now. Now, does it take a little bit longer than that? I think the end of the decade, because a lot of these television contracts are going to be up. And if they were ever going to make a change, it's probably around something like that. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is when you look at the NFL, there's a lot less drama. You have one king in terms of the commissioner, and in many cases, he has more power than the owners. I think we probably need to get to a system where, you don't necessarily have as many cooks in the kitchen as we have currently right now. Every AD is doing what's best for his or her program. Every president's doing what's best for his or her program. Every commissioner is doing what's best for his or her programs that they represent. And you have a lot of people in that kitchen, and I think that creates challenges because there is no unity in terms of the common problems that we're all navigating, which is what you listed, John. And it's at some point we're going to stop digging. That's when the foundation is formed. And right now we keep digging, and as much I have a seat at the table to a certain extent, but I'm not arrogant enough to think I have all the answers. I don't. If it was an easy solution, we would have already found it. But having to undo a system that's been in place for many, many decades, and get to a place that actually makes sense, where where we can get to potentially collective bargaining, and because the lawsuits aren't going to end, even with the House settlement that comes up in April, there's still a projection of many more lawsuits, and it's not a matter of if, but when you're going to get sued. And that's an uncomfortable state to live in. And, any case, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to find them.
So if football, in your vision, if football does break away, do you see just a very regionalized setup for the Olympic sports and basketball?
That's what I would
Yeah.
hope for. I would hope for that, and even to a certain extent, a regionalized, from a football standpoint. I think I think it's getting lost in it. We're not the NFL, and we do have alumni bases, and there is a point of pride in terms of the institutions you attend, and I think the fans do matter, and there's something to be said of the old model, where you played more regionally and it allowed fans to go and really interact. And coming from the state of Texas, I went to UT, and and being at the University of Houston, where that city would shut down when Texas and A&M would play, because half the city went to Texas and half the city grew up in Aggie, and that was what made college athletics special. And so I would love to get back to the regional based competition, and that would also help with us being more fiscally responsible than we already are in terms of the expenses. And there is a solution to this. We just have to maybe think a little more creatively than we are.
The transition to the Pac-12 for Boise State, how, in your mind, how does that factor in positioning Boise State for whatever comes next?
Yeah, I use, a Utah or a TCU, even BYU to a certain extent. I'm big on movement creating opportunities, and you can't ever settle. And I said that before, and to see what that move has already done for us from a financial standpoint, when you're looking at renewals and, selling out our basketball arena, and, selling out the season tickets in our basketball arena, I should say. And, having the Zags come through and what that does, and trying to create more opportunity and assets, so I can monetize it to then cover, what we're spending. Going to the Pac it provides us that opportunity. And then, it ties into a lot of what I said. I want to be with like institutions that want more than what they currently have, and that are in a position to do it, and that are willing to invest. And, in many ways, you got to spend money to make money. And, and that's been our mentality since the day I got here. And to be in with a brand like the Pac, to put us in a better position, and whatever ends up happening with the CFP, feeling like the winner of that conference should go every year. And, and that gives me a lot of hope. And that's the goal, right? We're competitive, and we want to win championships at the highest level. And so I think a lot of that ties into, the move, and making sure that we're positioned. And it doesn't guarantee anything, but, like I said, movement creates opportunity, and I think it's going to create a lot of opportunity for us in the future.
I'm curious about what you said about the brand of the Pac-12, because a lot of people thought, when the 10 schools left, the Pac-12 brand was dead, but you still viewed it as something meaningful, more meaningful than the Mountain West brand, perhaps.
100%. When you look at our community, and the number of people that moved in from the West Coast, and what the Pac means, and I think it's gone a long way for us. And I can only speak for Boise State, but that was one of the number one things that I heard, because that's what people remember. Understanding, and I'm not delusional, like I understand the teams that aren't in it anymore, and in the Big 12 and in the Big 10, but there still is a lot of value in the Pac-12 and their history, and especially where we're located, especially where we recruit, and especially with those parents and our donors and our fans. And that's something that I can monetize, and it's gone really well for us so far, where we've seen an uptick in renewals and season tickets and investment back into us.
You're getting that affirmation with that stuff you just mentioned, but when Teresa Gould is selling you on the Pac-12, she's got some numbers on paper from consultants saying, here's what I think our rights will be worth, or Maybe you knew Gonzaga was in the fold at that point, but you guys will now have actual numbers to sell to the next school that comes in, that final all sports bite of expansion that needs to be taken. What was that like for you to maybe take that leap? And are you looking at each other, the four that originally left? Those discussions must have been fascinating.
Yeah, the discussions were, and I have to take, or am willing to take, the necessary risks to better our situation. And nothing is guaranteed. I can guarantee my attitude and my efforts, and that hasn't changed. But I felt there was enough meat on the bone that it was going to better our situation, whether I could monetize it myself or it was additional revenues coming in because of those that we were aligning with and being underneath that brand and umbrella. It was a fascinating experience for me, and having never gone through that before, and as still a newer AD, but like most decisions that I've had to make, guys, over the last 4 years, I have maybe half the information, and I have to do what I feel is in the best interest of my institution. And, just like I chose Spencer, it's head, heart, and gut all the time. No one gives me a template. There isn't, at least, I could probably write it now, but an AD book for dummies, when you're presented these opportunities, nothing is guaranteed. And, but I'm always going to bet on myself. I'm going to bet on my team, and we felt it was going to put us in a better position and situation. And, and going through those conversations and having that in the back of my mind that, yeah, I get it. They were, they're just numbers on a paper until we can go, and actually Octagon's doing great work. And until we actually, have more of a formalized offer and whatever that looks like, I still feel like we are going to be in a much better position and situation than we were in.
Let's say you're appointed czar of the group of five. Is there something that you think needs to be done to strengthen that level, the schools at that level? Because we're seeing this, right? You got the SEC and the Big Ten, and then there's the next level with the ACC and the Big 12. What would you say? Is there something that could be done, you think, at the group of five level that would really help?
I think in general, and it probably goes without saying, I think the group of fives need investment from their institutions and from their communities. It's a dollars and cents game, and not that we need what everyone else has. And we understand what we're up against in terms of the SEC and Big Ten, and you could even put Big 12 and ACC in there. We're a good example of that this year. Sometimes it doesn't matter how much you have. It's what you do with what you do have. And, and I think we've always been known as a school that does more with less. But imagine what it would be like if I had that much more.
Yeah.
And that's been my message to our community, to Bronco Nation, to my institution. And I think a lot of group of fives, are in the same boat. I talked to a lot of those athletic directors, and, what we're being asked to do is quite honestly unrealistic. But we're in it for the fight. And, I think if there was more investment and a way to, I understand it's not ever going to be equal, but, the group of five is treated differently. The group of five does have less. And at some point, we have to figure that out. And I believe there's a lot of value. And I think from a fan perspective and even from a monetization, when you look at, network agreements and whatever else, to me, more is better. And I look at March Madness and what they've done. I don't know why we can't, I'm not saying do something similar to that from the numbers standpoint, but when you look at 134, FBS institutions, and I'm not saying all of those maybe want to be in something else, but there is a way to create a system that would work for everyone and at least, equalize a little bit to where, the competition will drive that value over the course of time. And I'm always going to be in the fight, especially for our brand and who we are. But it is a different, having come from the Power Four, or Power Five at the time, it's apples and chainsaws, as I go through, the budgets currently, and where we sit from a football operating standpoint compared to the other 11 schools that are in the CFP, we're an outlier. And when you look at some of those schools and what they have, Some of those schools have more for their football budget than I do for my overall department in 18 sports that I represent, and so it is a point of pride on one hand. On the other hand, we got to find a way to do more. And so I think if communities and institutions and maybe states in general, figure out a way to navigate that, I think you're going to see the level of competition and product rise.
I think the morning of the Oregon game, you went for a run in Eugene, if I remember that right. And
yeah.
So let's say, you're playing you win a quarterfinal, you're in a semifinal, or maybe you're in the national title game and get a chance to go for a run that morning. Is your mind in that time drifting from a to-do list, like I need to meet with this donor, I've got this obligation, or are you able to kind of run and let yourself relax a little bit?
I'm not sure I ever relax, John. I try to, but this job takes a lot from me. And so usually those runs are spent, my faith's important to me. I pray, I give, glory to him and think about the path and the process and the good and bad days. And I think for me, it's good to, reminisce, so to speak. And, some days, I was sitting at this desk and I would, not necessarily emotional, but call my wife saying, I don't know if I can do this. And then it's just, you keep going and the sun comes up and you start stringing together weeks. And then you get to a point of that run and, and you start thinking about those moments and the calls with my dad and my mom and people in the industry that I love and care about and just, how hard it was. This job is not easy. Thank God it's not rocket science, but it's not easy. It takes a lot. And, and for me, at least it keeps me balanced and I don't ever want to take anything for granted, and so those runs are important for my own mental health and well-being of, remembering who I am, where I've come from, and that there's still a fight ahead. And so by the end of that run, I'm already thinking about outcome of game, and I'm big on putting my beliefs out there and what I expect from the team and a lot of self-talk. And so it's, it would be scary, I think, for people if I was recorded. I talk to myself a lot, but it's something that has become a tradition for me. And I do before every game, however cold or hot it is. And it's something that relieves some of that stress, but it's still there. It still drives me.
Before we let you go, we usually ask our guests if they have gotten a piece of advice over the years, personal, professional, whatever, that really you've carried forward with you.
Yeah. Two pieces. One, there are only two things I can control on a daily basis that will drive this department. It's my attitude and my effort. And that has always been a point of pride for me that, I always go back to, no matter how good or bad things are. I try to show up with a smile, treat people right. And I go to work. And the other one is a quote. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets credit. And that really drives, I think our department. It takes a team, and it's not me. I get a lot of credit because I wear the AD hat. But I'm surrounded by some amazing teammates and people and donors and people who are willing to help and who have bought into my vision and our direction. And we wouldn't be here without them. And so that's something that, the AD at Baylor told me, back when I first started, and something that I feel has helped me along the way, that remember, what my purpose is, and I'm here to serve, and it takes a team.
Jeramiah, thank you. I really appreciate the time. Good luck to you. Have a great holiday as well. Have a great Christmas, and excited to see your team play.
Thanks, John. Thanks. Thank you both. And Merry Christmas. And I appreciate the time.
Thanks for doing this. We really appreciate it. All the best.
Thank you.
Rapid reaction to Jeramiah Dickey. Wilner, what jumped out at you?
I think he has got he is clearly forward thinking and imaginative. He is, I think, in some ways, a model AD, especially at the group of 5 level, where you've got to be extra creative to navigate this environment. Right. I mean, the fact that he hired Spencer Danielson, last year during the season, then promoted him. It all kind of fits with what Boise is all about. I think, creative, aggressive, doing more with less. He seems like a pretty good fit there.
Yeah, I think G5 schools are going to have to play Moneyball, and he is doing. I think justifiably so. Out fundraising.
Yeah,
you have to strike right now if you're Boise State with your fan base and your donors. They're excited. They want to support. They're seeing a payoff for all the support that they've given to this point. And you've got Ashton Genty coming off, Heisman appearance. You just have a lot to sell right now, and there's probably some times where you don't as a G5 athletic director. So I think justifiably so, he's out there selling right now and trying to elevate the profile of the school and elevate the gift giving. Because I do think schools like Boise State, it's not just that they are making more with less. I think they understand where to spend their dollars maybe better than some of the others. Like you just see a lot of excess at some of the schools were stockpiling talent from an NIL standpoint, and Boise State having to really lean into its relationship with Ashton Genty. And, you look at the Heisman finalists. So you got Cam Ward, who played at 3 different schools, and you've got Dylan Gabriel, played at multiple schools, and Travis Hunter, he played at 2 schools. So he followed his coach to Colorado, and there's Genty in his Boise State gear. It's all he's ever known. I mean, I think that's really a strong, affirming message for everybody out there that's fed up with the portal in this era of athletics.
Yeah. The more you have, the more you spend. That is college athletics, right? A lot of people have said that there's not a revenue problem. There's an expense problem. And if you're a Boise State and you've had to manage with a little bit less, you become more efficient. To me, they're a little bit like Utah, especially Utah of the Mountain West Pac-12 transitioning era. Just really efficient, and it's continued, but really efficient with their resource allocation.
Yeah, and look, timeline wise, Jeramiah Dickey is hired right around the time that the school was already finalizing the deal to bring Andy Avalos from Oregon to Boise State, and he inherits him, and there's this dip in production. And, there were questions of like, could Boise State still be Boise State? Like, what has changed? Did you lose all the culture of the program? And they went, nope. And they went right back to who their identity is, and they know who they are. They know what they are. And that's really valuable, I think.
You mentioned the Heisman in there, and certainly he talked about it. Should we get into that for a few minutes here?
Let's do it, because we disagreed with our ballots, which I find very interesting. I thought Ashton Genty had the best season, and he's got his team in the playoff. To me, this wasn't difficult. To me, the question came, is Travis Hunter 2 or 3 on my ballot? Not is he 1 or 2. I had Genty up top, and I really valued the fact that he carried his team to the playoff. And you had Travis Hunter up there. Why?
I did. I valued the fact that he did something that we haven't seen in 80 years. He played all conference at an all conference level, first team all conference level on offense and defense. And that just, is he the best receiver in the country? I don't know. He's in the top few. Is he the best corner? He's in the top few. And just to be that impactful on 2 different sides of the ball, I just thought it was remarkable. But they were both worthy, right? And that is the big thing. I think it is getting lost in the debate, and the fact that there is a debate tells you a lot about the candidates. Either of them would have been perfectly worthy of winning the award outright for most of the last 10 or 15 years, right? But it so happened that they both had these incredible seasons at the same time. And that, in some ways, it's a shame. I wish we could have had Genty next year or Hunter last year, and he hadn't gotten hurt, but they were both worthy of it.
Yeah, and look, there's 903 votes that were cast. The thing I didn't understand is there were like 25 voters who did not cast a ballot, and this was the vote to cast a ballot in, because it was interesting and regionally interesting the way it broke down. I also think this is supposed to be subjective. I'll go back to the episode we did on your AP top 25 voting. And for people who haven't seen that episode, go back into the comments or go back into the YouTube channel and find that, where you really talk about it. Like, we don't have to agree on this. Nobody has to agree on this, but it's interesting when I talk to voters to see what they valued, because I look at this as like, okay, Dylan Gabriel carried his team to the playoff. Genty's got his team in the playoff. Cam Scadaboo's got his team in the playoff. Travis Hunter's going to be playing in an Alamo Bowl and then watching.
Yeah.
And so I even went back to Colorado's season and I went, I think there's an argument about who's the MVP for Colorado. Is Shedeur Sanders a more valuable player to Colorado than Travis Hunter? I mean, that could be an episode we do, but great debate. It's a fun season. I agree that with those people who think the Heisman needs to be moved back, because I think everything we're going to see in the next month should be part of the football season.
Yeah, they need to move it. They need to move it, because we're going to have a situation potentially where a quarter of a team's games are played after the Heisman Trophy. If you play in the first round of the playoffs and get to the championship, 4 of your 16 games are or 17 games are in the playoff after the trophy's been awarded. I talked to the Heisman folks last week. They said they are monitoring the situation. Right? The Heisman Trust meets every spring. They meet with ESPN, all that. And they are going to meet again this spring and discuss the timing. But it's something that they need to think seriously about. It's always been a regular season award, but the sport is not nearly as focused on the regular season as it used to be. And when the playoff goes to 14 or 16, it's going to be even more of a postseason sport.
Pivoting into another player and the portal. John Maty, Washington State quarterback, jumps into the transfer portal. I did a little reporting on the front end of this as I talked with donors at Washington State who were part of the Cougar Collective. They had 2 meetings together where they kind of put together their pitch and formalized their pitch. They made that pitch on last Tuesday at the football offices in front of John Maty. They obviously feel like they have a relationship with the kid. They like the kid. They wanted to keep him, but he's getting in the portal. It's there are a lot of numbers floating around out there. I heard of $1.5 million that potentially an SEC school, maybe Auburn, was dangling. Now I'm hearing as much as $3 million with his whole NIL package. And John Maty is certainly a talent. But what do you make of Maty in the portal?
Well, to me, it was kind of a done deal when Oklahoma hired Ben Arbuckle, right?
Yeah.
Washington State's play caller, and then Oklahoma's starting quarterback goes in the portal, and all of a sudden things are wide open there in Norman, and he's a Texas kid, right? So you're growing up in West Elm, Texas, and you could be the starting quarterback at Oklahoma. It's tough. It is tough. And, Boise was able to do what Washington State couldn't. Boise kept Genty last year. Washington State couldn't keep Maty, but that is, for the programs that develop big time players, that's the challenge at that level.
And I think for Washington State, the way that the season finished probably hurt them as much as anything, because I think if you could have shown John Maty, you can get close to the playoff, or you can get into the playoff by going 11-1 and being right there alongside some other schools that were knocking on the door. It would have been a little different conversation. But as one of the donors at Washington State told me, I mean, they were torn, because on one hand, they developed a relationship with the kid and they like him, and he's 20 years old. And on the other hand, they're going, we really want him to stay. But I had one donor tell me he may have life-changing money in front of him. And as a friend, I would tell him, go get the money, go take it. But he said, that's not what's best for my school. And so I think it was a really, really tough time for Washington State fans in the end there.
They'll be all right. I mean, a year ago, they lost Cam Ward. It's like, who's going to be their quarterback, right? Maty comes. They have shown that they can identify and develop quarterbacks. So I think there's a good chance that we'll have a quarterback in Pullman next year who's much better than anybody would have expected.
Pivoting to the Big Ten. The Big Ten releasing their schedule for 2025. And, of course, it's met with groans from all of the schools in the conference, and everybody complaining about their draw. But
are you hearing the outrage in Portland and Eugene up there?
It started with people saying they're going to go 12-0. But within hours, it was people complaining about the Big Ten screwing Oregon. Like you tell me, like you wrote about Washington and Oregon fans, you basically told them, just shut up. You got a good ride.
Well, the first thing I think is, what did they expect, right? You join a conference that's a nation away. 14 of the 18 schools are 2 time zones away. Of course, everything is going to tilt in that direction. Did Husky and Duck fans think they were going to join this league and they were going to get the breaks on the scheduling front? I mean, I don't know. I find they have one, I think, legit gripe, but for the most part, it's just, come on, people, deal with it, right? This is what you signed up for. They do have, there's a couple instances, one for each team, where they're going on the road and the team they're playing, the host team, has had a bye. Yeah. And if you're the road team and you're facing a host that's had 2 weeks to prepare, that's a competitive disadvantage. And Washington's facing it, Oregon's facing it, but Michigan also has to do that. Michigan they're going to USC, and USC's coming off a bye, right? I think Penn State's got the same deal at Iowa. So I just feel like, the complaining from the Pacific Northwest on this is, a little bit excessive, although I am sure Washington State and Oregon State fans are probably getting a kick out of it.
Yeah, and you've got, look, I think the foreshadowing of this was the Friday night games that Oregon and Washington had to play. You're not Michigan and Ohio State in the eyes of the conference yet. And I'll tell you this, Wilner, from being in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title game, that there was some talk in the press box about how Oregon will be perceived and how long it will take before Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State fans and maybe some other schools all kind of turn on Oregon and don't see Oregon as kind of a welcome newcomer anymore, because Oregon ran through the thing, had those weekly videos, kind of had fun week to week, put the duck in the river in Indianapolis. Was not a gentle entry into the conference. USC, UCLA, and Washington kind of came in like lambs. Yeah. Oregon came in like a lion. And so there's some question here about how long it'll take before that act wears thin.
That's too funny. It'd be good for Oregon, running through the conference the way they did. And I haven't heard any complaints, to be clear. None of the schools are whining, right? It's the fans. And you expect that to a certain extent.
Yeah. Pivoting, hey, how about the Pac-12? I mean, Jeramiah Dickey talked a little bit about, what's to come.
Yep.
But when do they add a school? What's the media timeline? Do you have any insight?
I'll throw out an over-under for you. I guess we probably need to have 2. One is when they have enough certainty on a media deal. I would put April 1st as a timeline over-under there. And then when they get the 8th school, I would say let's put May 15th. Are you going over or under on
I'm
those?
going under on both. And
on both.
Only because I sat down with Teresa Gold and had breakfast with her. I wrote about this a few weeks ago. And I really was trying to push her for a timeline, and she is not going to make the mistake that George Kliavkoff or, any of the predecessors made. She refused there. But I did kind of take away from our conversation that the expansion piece probably is going to have to be settled at least with a handshake before the media rights deal is formalized. And I kept kind of poking around the timeline of it. And what I came away with was the start of March Madness, when they throw up the ball for the first tip of March Madness on that Thursday. I think that that's the target for them to have a media deal. And I said, does expansion come after? And she made the comment and said, not necessarily. And it makes sense as you talk to the media consultants and they say, whoever's going to buy them is going to want to know who's in the conference.
Sure.
So I kind of think I'm looking at under on your timelines, and I'm looking at that Thursday where they throw the ball up in the air. I think the Pac-12 will know that extra bite of expansion and probably know where those games are going to be played.
Well, they're going to have some kind of working understanding of the media deal that they can then take to the school to get the handshake, that then they can go back to sign the media deal. I mean, they're going back and forth, but certainly the bottom line on the timeline is that it's got to be done far enough in advance of July 1st that any school can make their formal withdrawal before the exit fee jumps, on July 1st, 2025.
Yeah. I also took away that they're not going to go with an FCS school. I mean, you've seen kind of the UC Davis coming into the Mountain West in other sports, or Northern Illinois getting some consideration for the Mountain West. And I don't think Sacramento State is on the menu for the Pac-12. I think that next bite, I still am looking at UNLV and Memphis and Tulane and going, is it 1? Is it 2?
Yeah.
Is it 3? What do they do? And that vote is probably going to come from a media company who says, yeah, okay, we'll pay for it. What are we willing to pay for? So interesting to kind of watch that. A little development in the ACC footprint in Berkeley. Nick Rolovich, now part of Justin Wilcox's staff. What do you make of that?
I mean, it is something else, right? Here you have a coach who was fired because he wouldn't get vaccinated, being employed by a school that had the strictest COVID policies in the country. It is rich. Hey, first of all, good for Rolo getting back in it. The guy deserves a second chance. He's a good coach.
Yeah.
And good for Cal just saying, politics be damned. We need to score. We need to win.
We need points. Cal announcing that it's got a real football program by saying, hey, we're willing to do what's necessary to get a guy in here who can strategize some offense, scheme up some offense. I'm a big believer in second opportunities in most cases. I think Rolovich deserves another chance to reestablish himself. And I do think we look back at the pandemic and I think we see a lot of weirdness that went on that, we can second and third guess. And I think if we all went through it again, we'd do it differently. But he's got to prove that it wasn't him, right? That's what this opportunity is. He's got to prove that he can function within the structure of a university that is publicly funded and in part of the UC system. So, I'll put this in the same file cabinet that back in the day with the Trailblazers, when they had all these players that were coming through Portland and they would, do awful things. They were, setting league records for technical fouls, driving around in a yellow Hummer and getting arrested and dogfighting and all these things were going on. They got traded to other cities. They had an opportunity to show that it wasn't them. They could point back at Portland and be like, hey, it was just the DNA of that franchise. That's where Rolovich is. He has a chance here at Cal to be like, hey, I wasn't that guy. Look who I am now. And so I do think, I think he's going to be successful scheming, but let's see how he kind of conducts himself moving forward. And look, all about second chances. I think he deserves one.
Well, and I should say that he's a senior offensive analyst. They hired Brian Harsin, the former Boise State head coach, as offensive coordinator. Right. And Harsin had, a vaccine controversy when he was the head coach at Auburn. So Cal really just throwing politics to the wind and prioritizing winning, and you like to see it. It's about time.
Well, it's kind of like when Sark goes down to be an analyst and call plays at Alabama, right?
Yeah.
And so then, you sort of get this chance to get your feet back underneath you and get on in the world. There are bigger things. Look, I appreciate everybody who watched this episode. Jeramiah Dickey was fantastic. I think we can all learn a little bit from that, and I gleaned some interesting things from it. I'd love for our viewers who are watching on YouTube to hit that subscribe button. You subscribe, it automatically will show up in your feed. Share it with other people. Appreciate that you're here for it. If you're listening on the audio podcast, do the same thing. We will be back with an all-new episode next week.
Thanks very much, everybody.